There it goes. Begin with Lori Salela. Lori, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Peggy. I want to appreciate everybody coming on today, and I'm really excited about this program. I sort of got into the regenerative ag and grazing through the Beginning Women Farmers and Ranchers program that was started in 2012, and actually Peggy was our teacher, and it was sponsored by Holistic Management International, and we went through a full year's training. Then I went back and helped the next couple of years, and I am trying to finish up my certification to be a certified educator with Holistic Management. And it's been a fun journey. I've got my husband's a veterinarian, and our clinic is right here on our property. We've got about 200 acres now that we've put together right here where we live. We've got 85 Dorper sheep and about 30 Red Angus cattle. They're primarily commercial Red Angus. And we've got 2 daughters. One has come back and is working for us now on the place. And my older daughter is actually interested in trying to start some sort of an enterprise on the property and some sort of a bed and breakfast or something like that. So that's kind of our story. We're in Terrell, Texas, east of Dallas. We get 35 to 40 inches of rain. So it's really important that we can grow a lot of grass. But as far as with the sheep, we've got to really manage them for the parasites. You can go ahead to the next slide there. So our flock of Dorper sheep are registered seed stock. Started out with 4 ewes when my kids were showing. We had a group of Jacob ewes for a research project for a while, but we just gradually kept growing the flock, and we sat down with our holistic management program and we wrote out a holistic goal. And we decided that we wanted to raise seed stock. We wanted to be kind of on the higher end of the sheep, but we wanted to make these sheep still work for us. So all our animals, they're out, they're grazing. We're using them for weed control. We actually bought a little group of goats to clear out a bunch of brush in the back in this what we call river pasture, and our sheep are working better than they were. Somebody had fed them out of a bucket, and they think they're supposed to be fed out of a bucket, so didn't work too well. All right, go ahead. You can go to the next slide there. There we go. So during the spring, we will sometimes graze ours together in what some people call a flurd. Part of our property, we've got fenced with what they call the Stay Tough fence. So the entire fence is electrified. So I can tie off anywhere to that fence with a poly wire, and I can cut it any direction, any amount of space. I've pretty much got the sheep where they'll stay in with 2 strands of poly wire. Every once in a while, if we've got lambs, we don't want to go under the wire, we'll do 3. But with the cattle on another piece of our property where we just run the cattle, we just use 1 poly wire, and we just run off of this Stay Tough fence. We've got it at least on one side, so everything will be electrified. Go ahead. While that's changing, we started out where we're one of those places where we fed hay. We had 15 head of cattle on 50 acres, and we were feeding round bales of hay from November all the way through the year. We never saw a dung beetle. It took us 3 years on one property that we had to ever see a dung beetle. We had leased it to a guy that heavily used ivermectin. And now, as you can see, these dung beetles in the far right, the biological community is humming. We've got manure going into the ground, and we're primarily Bermuda grass. We would like to throw that more towards some natives, but we can grow a lot of Bermuda grass, and I'm just not willing to go in there and spray chemicals. I mean, you just think about it. If we had done that this year with the drought, not knowing it was coming, we would have had to just, almost destock. So we would like to go towards more natives, but we're just gonna, over the years, try to change that soil and microbes and see if we can get more varieties of grasses coming in. But right now we're working with what we've got. Okay, go ahead. So one of the things that we've done, and they'll be talking a lot about it this next year to soil to water, but holistic management's coming up with a program that they call Safe to Fail. And what that is kind of setting up some little experiments where if something really goes wrong, you're not going to wreck a large part of your property. So we took, as you can see in this one, we took a 20th of an acre and we crammed all our sheep in it for 4 hours, took the grass all the way down, and then we gave it very long recovery times. And what you want to do is you want to see how far you can push that and what kind of recovery you'll get. You want to we're trying to get as much manure, as much energy into that soil, and then give it lots of times to recover. And a lot of places you'll start seeing new varieties of grasses coming up. Go ahead. So when we did this, we did it in one spot with our cattle, did it in another spot with the sheep, and we gave it long recoveries. As you can see, we got that knocked down, that grass completely knocked down, and we left up net wire fence so that it had a true recovery, made sure nothing else got back on it, and gave it long recovery times. We, on our place, this first time around with both of them, we didn't see new varieties of grasses. You can go ahead and go forward. But we had much less weeds than we've had before in those areas. So you're basically setting up a little experiment on your place to see what's going to happen. These are two of the places where we had originally had the sheep and the cattle. And as you can see, primarily we've got ryegrass in the spring. We've got Bermuda grass that comes in during the summer, but we had a lot less weeds and we had a lot of grass that came back. So this is something that you can try on your place. It's easy to set up, and some of the people have seen just phenomenal results with different varieties of grasses coming in that the seedbed was there. They just had to get it set up so that they could have time to get started and grow. Go ahead. And this is a spot, this was kind of an accident, and I call it our accidental safe to fail. We had an employee that was supposed to move these cattle to a different field, and they didn't get them moved. And you can see this weed over here on the left, and they just hammered that pasture, that paddock on the right. But over here in this paddock where the cattle are now, and we had just as much in the other one. So, write records. If something like that happens, take some pictures, write it down, write what the dates were, and see what happens, because sometimes you'll have a really good surprise. You'll see it a lot around water troughs where people have accidents, and that actually they end up being just fine and they'll have double the grass. Okay, go ahead. So our sheep, when we're rotating them, I never leave the sheep more than 3 to 4 days because of parasite issues. So that's one reason that being able to move these fence lines and cut my pastures up into much smaller areas really helps. The other thing that I've done, and I really encourage everybody that wants to start down the regenerative way of practicing, is find a mentor. I was lucky that I got in this beginning women's farmer group. I'm still best friends with most of these ladies that I went through there with. We call each other all the time, ask each other questions. We found a mentor, Betsy Ross, up in that top picture. She mentored all of us. And you'll find that everybody in this field, you're not going to find anybody that doesn't want to answer a question. No question gets, there's no dumb question. And use your resources. Holistic Management International, they have online classes, in-person classes, programs. Texas AgriLife Extension, the sheep and goat specialist, they've got some great information out there on things like parasite management, how to do it without chemicals, NRCS, Noble Foundation, and all these places. A lot of them are like NCAT, they're nonprofits. A lot of them are government agencies, and they're basically working for us. And they would not be in this profession if they didn't want to help people. They could go out and do something else where they never had to talk to a person. So don't be afraid to, pick up the phone, join this organization with NCAT, and take advantage of all the free information, and find people out there, because they're there and they're willing to help you. So I guess that's my story.
Great. Thank you, Lori. A question in the chat box is, in your safe to fail trial, how long of a recovery did you give?
He stayed off of that spot for a full year.
Okay.
And it grew back a lot of ryegrass and a lot of Bermuda grass, and it lignified, but it got put back on the ground when we came back through again, and we just got that much more carbon in the soil. So it's a small enough space that it's not going to hurt anything.
Sure. Great. Thank you. All right. Thanks so much. Let's move on to Garrett. Garrett is, we couldn't get Garrett's webcam to work, so we may not see him, except we can see his pictures and we can hear him. So Garrett, go ahead, please.
All right. Well, like Lori said, thanks for having me on. Just to give you some information about myself. My wife and our 3 boys, we live in Fredericksburg, Texas. Fredericksburg is basically due west of Austin, north of San Antonio, in the Texas Hill Country. Before I got into regenerative ag, I was born and raised on a ranch my whole life. And when I went off to school and got my degree, I came back and I was a teacher and coach for about 10 years. And I loved doing it, but anytime I had free time, I always wanted to be out at the ranch. And so one day, visiting with another gentleman who was a real estate agent, we were just talking, and he goes, I sold a ranch to some folks. Would you have any interest in managing and being the caretaker for that? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And just kind of said it very nonchalant, not thinking of it. And long story short, 2 weeks later, there I was working on a ranch and been loving it ever since. But when I first started, I did things very traditional. I was doing just basically what you kind of way I grew up, way that I see things, visited with people. But I always asked the questions, why? And so in our area, I was looking for cattle that be adaptive kind of to our area. And that led down looking to I was recommended to a producer that kind of had low maintenance and grass efficient cattle, and the things that he was saying just right away made sense to me. And a good friend of mine, another friend, I ran it by him and I said, "Hey, have you ever heard about this?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, we bought 4 of their bulls." And I went, "Oh man, you're kidding me." And so that started up a great conversation. And so basically our operation that we have now, we're a cow calf operation. And I also do some custom grazing. As I worked for this ranch, we live out in the country as well and have about 50 acres. And so we always had a few animals, but never a lot. And always wanted to say, man, it'd be great to have some more acreage. And these last couple of years, we've been able to lease some properties, and that's been exciting because it's been allowed us now to grow our operation. So what it's allowed our property to basically turn into, I call it my research and development lab, to where I try different things. I've done cover crops. I've done a little bit of used fire. We've done some brush control. We've put in infrastructure as far as water development. And so if you can kind of see there in that middle picture a little bit, that was a field. And out of our 50 acres, about 35 acres of it was field, 15 acres was pasture. That 35 acres was constantly tilled, small grains, maybe some corn. Chemicals were applied to it, fertilizers. And so probably about 6 or 7 years ago, we stopped doing that. And I had the bright idea. I was like, you know what? I'm going to put, about 25 acres of that field in a Bermuda grass. And so we did that, and it's going all right. And then about a year or so later, I was like, it sure been nice to have a little bit more diversity out there, but it is what it is. But there was about 8 or 10 acres that I didn't do nothing with. And that's where I started implementing some cover crops and trying to get some soil fertility back into the ground. And I guess probably about 2020, 2021, after we seeded a little bit and some of our soil conditions got right. And then you can see that one photo there of me. I'm holding next to some big blue stem, and I was absolutely elated. I came into the house just hooping and hollering, and my wife goes, "Garrett, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And I said, "We got big blue stem." And so that was exciting. It was kind of one of those things to where you saw where, hey, maybe what we're doing, it's starting to work a little bit. But when we kind of started on a regenerative journey, which has been about 5 years now, it wasn't until about years 2 and 3 until we started seeing some of the big blue and some of the Indian grasses and stuff that we had. So anyhow, it's been great as far as when you're dealing with the land, you're dealing with a living, breathing organism. And so it's constantly changing. Like probably so many, we've been going through drought this year, and we're in a normally 30-inch rainfall, give or take. And right now we're at about 15 inches for the year. And so that's been a challenge. It's been a challenge to grow grass. But the area that we've been managed well, that has diversity, you can see that, it's been a little bit more resilient, I would think. So anyways, it's exciting to see that. But one of the things that was difficult and early on, and in a lot of ways it is now on some of our lease properties, is getting infrastructure implemented and being able to articulate the importance of infrastructure to landowners. It's one thing we can straight up portable fence or whatnot. We can be creative getting animals to get water, but when there is a lack of some infrastructure that's in place, and then when you see the cost of it, sometimes that can be a little bit disheartening. So there's always that challenge, but anyhow, we've been excited what regenerative ag, the principles of regenerative ag have done to our land, and excited to see what the future looks like.
Hey, great. Thanks, Garrett. Here's a couple of questions that in the chat box. One is, can you name the cover crops that you used?
In our cool season mix, we used triticale, Austrian winter peas, hairy vetch, turnips, dakin radish, cereal rye, and I might be missing one or two more. I know I think we had 9 or 10 different plant species in there.
Okay, great. And then, so Blake Mendez has a question, and I'm not actually sure I understand your question, Blake. He wrote, have you all experimented with solar arrays integrated into certain pastures close to any, I guess, of the Pedernales electric co-op infrastructure? I
have seen, I guess, some PEC where they've had set up some solar farms. I think right outside of Johnson City is one.
Okay.
If that's what he's referring to.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Garrett. I know that. And hello, I'm Blake Mendez with Clinco Energy, and I was wanting just to get a little feedback on what you'd seen. I know that there's PEC's been pretty aggressive and relatively speaking about building up local infrastructure. And I know that with a lot of the money that's available, that a great deal of it's intended to build out and improve the infrastructure of the distribution. I don't know, most people don't know this, but like once you go under a certain level, a lot of the distribution folks don't know what's what other than hitting something. It's like, did it work or not? And lights turn on or not. But as operations are changing and the world's getting a little bit more complex, there's just been more integration of solar into certain aspects of farming that some farms, family farms, see as valuable. There are a number of them. I know with the vineyards that we work with out here, which about a good deal of the state's vineyard production is out here. So it's really great market. But I just wanted to see if there's anything where you were starting to see the blending of the two that was meaningful for farmers as well as for the community.
Well, Blake, I will say, here in the hill country, so much of the land, which I can probably for a good chunk of Texas, is becoming so fragmented. And so, when people where they're putting in these solar farms or whatnot, it's on small acreage from a grazing standpoint, there are definitely some, I think Will Harris has alluded to this recently, just the fact of grazing sheep and goats under a lot of these solar panels or whatnot. So I don't know if that's answering your question or what you're alluding to.
That's exactly what it is.
But yeah, I think there's definitely some of that. In fact, yesterday I had to go outside. I was in San Antonio, on the east side of San Antonio.
Yes, sir.
And there is a huge solar that was out there and big panels. Well, I mean, I guess on one grid, I'm guessing there's probably 40 or 50 panels, and it probably covered 50 acres, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and that's the utility. That's a huge scale, and that tends to be not as conducive to what you're after and what we're all after as far as rebuilding soil. And there's a great deal of grading, and it can be, to a certain size of it, it gets pretty invasive. But the designs of building it actually into, say, for instance, in the vineyards where out in Brownfield, where it's with some rolling hills, very much like out in the hill country, but just integrating it so that there's very little to any kind of excavation, and it's mainly just working around what's there, what is intended to be there in the next 30 years.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, let us move on to Servando, and then we can come back to this topic later if we want to. Thank you, Garrett, very much. And of course, hang around because we'll have a lot of Q&A.
Yes.
Okay, Servando. Servando, he'll tell you where he's in a very different part of Texas. Are you there, Servando?
Yes, I am. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was just my end or
Okay.
the whole thing. But anyway, I want to thank NCAT for this opportunity to join this wonderful group of people that are with us today and joining with Lori and Garrett. But I'm a 5th generation rancher. We're down here in the southern part of Texas, Bruni. Some people confuse it with Bernie, but we're in Bruni, we're east of Laredo, Texas, down in the Hebronville, Freer area, if any of y'all are familiar with this part. And my wife and I, working in the city and what have you, and had our jobs and what have you. My wife continued with her job, but my calling was always coming back to the land. I mean, we'd always be out here on weekends and what have you, but that just wasn't enough for me, I felt. So 26 years ago, we decided to come live out here with the permission of my mom and dad, who are the owners of.
Did we lose him?
I think we might.
Uh-oh.
I don't know where y'all lost me at. I don't know if is it just my end or is it the
Well,
whole
yeah,
thing?
it may be you're in because most of us couldn't hear you. Maybe all of us couldn't hear you for a minute. So you're coming in and out.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it just mine that's kind of going like if it's in a loop, or are y'all having that same problem?
It seems to be
Buffering.
you, Servando, but go ahead and talk. We'll do as best we can.
Okay. Anyway, like I said, we're 26 years ago, my wife and I, with mom and dad's permission, who they were the landowners at the time and still living, gave us their blessing to come out here. My wife kept her day job in the city, and I kind of took the role of being Mr. Mom for our daughter, and at the same time trying to see what we can do out here on the property. And the tradition was still very much alive, and the way ranching had always been down in this part of South Texas. And down in this part, if it doesn't stick you, prick you, or bite you, you're not in South Texas. But we have a lot of different species of brush. I remember my grandmother, when she was a child, she was born in 1900, and she would tell me stories that they used to name different mesquite trees or just different trees, because this actually was prairie land, believe it or not, this part of South Texas. You wouldn't believe that by seeing it today in this part of the country. However, we're trying to reclaim and restore our land back. And back in 2011, we were blessed with the opportunity to start working more with NRCS in Webb County and other agencies. So one of the first things that we started doing was we did a water line distribution throughout the property. On one property, we got 600 acres, and that's in Webb and Duval County together. And then we have another property about 45-minute drive from here, and that's 350 acres, but a lot thicker, denser brush. So we started doing projects with water line distribution, cross fencing, and then we started doing some brush management. And most of our brush management evolved around stacking, raking, and root plowing. And 11 years ago, my thought back then was I wanted to work more with the native grasses. So before we did any clearing of brush, what we did was we got our boots on the ground, the agent and I at the time, and we kind of looked at what native grasses we already had here, but were competing and with a brush, and the brush was kind of encroaching on that native grass from really thriving. So we came up with a blend of about 5 different seeds. It was green sprangletop, plains bristlegrass, side oats grama, and I don't remember which other ones, but anyway, and different percentages of each, right? So we planted that. We did real well for about 7 years. And the agent always told me, Servando, that's a very hard thing to manage. Native grasses are a lot more temperamental, and they don't produce as much forage as your buffalo grass or other grasses for livestock. So I was just trying to, I was excited about the native grasses, as I still am to this day. However, after about 7 years, and we got recognized throughout that time for conservation of what we were doing and what have you with the natives, but time finally took its toll, and the natives kind of started phasing out. Buffalo grass that we had sporadically in different parts of the property, it's a very invasive grass, as most of you probably know. So that buffalo grass started kind of taking over. So my realization at that point was, okay, I'm just going to let nature do what nature does best, and kind of just sit back, wait, and observe of what's going on. And I'm going to let my natives thrive in the brush. And you know, in 11 years, we have noticed that we've got some open strips, as you can see on the lower pictures. On the in the middle and the lower ones, you know, we've got, those are the strips that we had eradicated all the brush. On the left lower picture, you'll see where we have a little enclosure, and that's kind of a monitor for me that NRCS kind of asked us to do, and not us, but most producers, so that it kind of have like a litmus gauge or a test to see how our grass is doing when cattle cannot eat it or graze it down versus what is around it. And then on the other pictures, you know, we have we have about 4 different soil types in our property, but they're all related in regards to the fact that we have a shallow pan of soil. So our brush does not get too high. Our grass has trouble sometimes, but you know, we've been very fortunate in 11 years to really see the property thrive with all those things that we've implemented, from water distribution, cross fencing, and brush management. But if you look at the upper middle picture, that's what a lot of some of the country looked like before. And we still have some areas like that. So I mean, you got this thick brush, it's non-grazable. There's really not much going on underneath it, not even natives. So that is always something that we're trying to cover, you know, be it by native grasses, managing our soils better, and making sure that we have some kind of cover on that ground, short of, you know, doing any cover crops or anything like that. In this part, it's just not very common practice. One of the things that I've learned as well is we have to be patient. You know, one of the questions that we were asked was, what was your biggest obstacle or challenge? And I'd probably say it was myself, unfortunately. You know, learning how to be patient was something that I had to really struggle with, but overcome. And I'm glad I have, because it's allowed me to really, you know, we're a microwave society. We want everything in 30 seconds or less, and it doesn't work that way. So if we're patient, if we just, you know, those rest periods are very important, and everything else, there's a story to be told. We just need to let it happen. And of course, we have to be vigilant of our management. My cattle don't know when to rotate. You know, that those are things that I have control of, or the management is only as good as my practices. But if they're done properly and well, then the benefits obviously are there. So we're continuously trying to cover our soils, and making sure that everything that lives on the property, from our cattle to our wildlife and everything else, because that's another enterprise, hunting, that we depend on. We want to make sure that everything is thriving and doing well, and just progressively getting better. You know, I belong to different boards, and every year we have what's called a workshop. And it's through NRCS as well. And every year they tell you, okay, what are the resource concerns this year for our area? And I'll give you all an example. They'll have air quality, water quality, erosion, riparians, brush management, animal health, so on and so forth. And I'm very steadfast, and I think I'll die with this thought till the day I die. I'm very adamant about, we can change everything around depending on what's happening. We're having issues with wild hog problems, or a fever tick, or whatever, or air quality or whatever. But I'm always steadfast on saying there's only one constant, in my opinion, and I don't know if I'm right or not, but in my opinion, there's only one that's always supposed to be on the top or high priority. And that for me is the soil, because we cannot have better air quality or better water quality or any of those things, or plant health or animal health, unless we start with our soil. And that's never going to change. You know, they're not making any more land, but we can improve the lands that we have. And you know, we're only on 600 acres. You know, before we started all these practices, I was probably grazable. And I mean, I really have to look at numbers hard, but for example, I was maybe at 200 or 300 acres, and not even maybe that much grazable with all that thick brush. Well, because we have removed a lot of that canopy, we've learned how to manage and introduce grasses. I can now say those 600 acres are probably truer to 600 acres grazable, if not better or more. So, you know, those are the things that have really made a huge difference for us. And I think somebody mentioned before about the dung beetles. You know, I had an issue one time. We had a spray for some weeds that we were having issues with, and it was recommended that we do a cocktail and spray over it, and we did. And soon after that, I started noticing that I had a lack of dung beetles. And I said, wait a minute, you know, was it that spray, or was it also when I was very big on Ivorank and all these other products for animal health? And it was scary not to see those little black beetles out doing what they do best. Thank God within time they came back, and I'm very hesitant to a large degree for chemical spraying. I may enter some in the future, because I have seen some wonderful things that spraying has done on other people's properties. But you know, it's really a balancing act, and we have to learn how to balance everything that we manage in regards to our properties. And thank God more people, I believe, are becoming more cognizant and aware of where their food's coming from and how it's being raised. And with that being said, we were fortunate in 2020, my wife and I, to start a small grass-fed beef business, you know, direct to consumer and retailer, or to consumer rather. And it's been a joy. It's really been a different journey for me, especially because I've been doing this all my life in some form or fashion. And you know, I'm not raising cattle anymore. I'm now selling meat and producing meat, and proud to know that we're doing it in the most respectful and responsible way possible, not only to the land and the animals itself, but to the ultimate person who is the one that's consuming it. And that really has just been a wonderful a journey for us. You know, we do a lot of things out here on the property. We've also done some burning as well. We've done a little bit, like I said early on, very, very limited to spraying, but we've done all this brush management and what have you. And I'm always trying to figure out, how can we do things better? And you know, a lot of times in this part of South Texas, and I include myself, a lot of times we're just like our South Texas brush, thick and dense, and we don't want to open up to any new ideas or thoughts and allow something innovative or creative or just natural to come into our minds to help us figure out, okay, how can we do this in a better and responsible way? So you know, that's the challenge in my neck of the woods. You know, I'm glad to be a part of NCAT and other organizations that I'm a part of and boards, because I feel now that our role is to educate one another, educate our consumers. And, you know, a lot of times I'll get my neighbor and he'll call me and say, hey, how come your property looks so much better than mine across the fence? And we've had the same amount of, it's how we're managing our properties. It's how we're rotating. You know, my cattle are my best instrument and tool out here. You know, we have used the tractor to get to these strips that you see at the bottom. But we had to jumpstart that middle picture on the top. We had to jumpstart it somehow. And that's how we did it mechanically at first. But I really don't want to see my tractor out here much anymore. I want to just continue to work with what we've got, or manipulate it in a different way, to where we have, you know, just a kind of a buffet of different things for all animals that coexist on the property to enjoy. And,
Thank you.
You know, it's just a trying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Servando. Oh, I'm hearing some feedback. I want to be sure we allow plenty of time for discussion, then people can talk with you some more. Okay. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. So at this part now, we're going to open it up. So the recording's going to stop and we're going to open it up. And one of the things that Darren's going to do while we're chatting with one another is that he's going to post a poll. It's going to come up on your screen And we just want to get some, and here's the first one, and we just want to get some feedback from you. So we get a little bit of an idea of who you are, what you're interested in. And, you know, it will inform us as we go forward about what kind of information to bring to you. So if you'll just fill that out and click on it, and that'll be done with that. And now, so I wanted to, you know, really make this casual where we talk back and forth. And I'm just going to ask everyone to kind of be mindful as we talk with each other.